Okay, my story began in New York City in 2020. By 2020, I was appointed as a Cuban diplomat to the United Nations. And it was part of a great program because at the same time, I was working at the UN for Cuba for the Alliance of the Small Island Developing States, which is a negotiation group for climate change and sustainable development. And at the same time, I was going to Columbia University and New York University. So I thought in January 2020 that was a huge new beginning for new career endeavors. What I didn't know, what I didn't suspect by January 2020 was that a drawback was waiting for me. Maybe the most profound lesson in my life, which was freedom. So my days in New York City were hectic. I mean, reading, studying, going to fancy meetings at the UN, preparing negotiation strategies, negotiating declarations and resolutions for the UN and for the Alliance of the Small Islands, and then in the evening taking advantage of exactly being in Murray Hill, Lexington and 38, in that beautiful corner, 2 blocks from a few blocks from the Empire State and from the Chrysler. I mean, great location to explore the city and to meet people, to be in the center of the universe, in my view. And that was so unexpected. That was a contact with opinions from people gathering from all cultures and latitudes and background, thinking whatever they want, whatever they had in their minds. And that struck me. That was a huge hit in considering my background. Because look at this, I came from Cuba, right? When you were born and raised in Cuba, your parents taught you that you need to have a political closet. You need to have a mindset about what's politically correct. And you need to apply this in your daily life for knowing what to say, who to say that, where to say it. And you know, it's just the anthropological damage functioning in the social brain inherited in that society from 60 years of repression. And that anthropological damage was being hit constantly in New York City by the people I was meeting, the conversation I was having, the exchange I was having with people that didn't have to say every day, thank you, Fidel Castro, for everything that you have done for me. Thank you, Revolution, for making me the guy I am right here and right now. So that was a huge confrontation that invited me to have personal opinions and personal views on everything. And then March 23, 2020 was my last days in the streets of New York City because the pandemic outbreak just began and I was in the epicenter in March 2020 in New York City. So the instructions from Capital were that the control over the diplomats will be taken to the extreme. So I spent 6 months without being able to put a step in Lexington Avenue again. I mean, that was the reflection of what was happening in Cuba. In Cuba, the economic situation was just terrible because of the drop of international tourism. The government decided to live on remittances, and people had to live however they could, like paying food in US dollars 2 times or 3 times the regular price in the international market, while people were earning like $10 to $15 a month. Yes, a month, which is incredible for any country's standards, right? So I spent actually 200 days thinking, what should I do against what's happening here every day? So to be honest, I started calling to my wife in Cuba. I started to share that something was happening in front of my view. 200 days seeing the Empire State from your window, hearing your family in Cuba telling you the story that is going over there, you being unable to cross the streets in Manhattan because the people around you says you can cross the streets in Manhattan, you are super controlled. So to be honest, those days I started to think in that I really needed a way to escape from that reality. I needed a way to know the meaning of freedom. So I started to hide in that building, which is completely full of microphones in every corner. And I attempt not telling everybody my thoughts because I knew that everybody
in that building could be potentially an agent from the state security. And I talked to my wife, hey, this is happening to me. And I received her support. She said to me, okay, I think that you are right, let's do it. I know it's difficult, we are not together, but let's try to do it, right? Honestly, I was in front of the doorstep of that building in Lexington, super ready to abandon the mission permanently, like, I don't know, 50 times. But I couldn't, guys, I couldn't. I had my wife and I had my daughter in Cuba. What would happen to them, right? If I decided to leave the mission and not being able to ever return again to Cuba? What would be the kind of retaliation that they would suffer? So my day was counting. December came, and I returned to Cuba. I remember the last day I was in Fort Lauderdale Airport, just about to make the connection flight to Havana. And I was, oh my gosh, what I'm doing now. Last second to defeat, last second to be free. And I returned to Havana. And I remember the exact point when I was waiting in the living room of my house, waiting for my daughter. She was coming from the daycare. And I remember exactly her expression. He was, Papa? Like questioning herself, what's going on? Who are you? Are you my dad? And I hugged my little daughter. She was 2 years old. And she said, Daddy, 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 Daddy. That was my minute of confirmation. That minute I knew that I did the right thing, which was joining my family again. So I was applying to thousands of universities in the US and Europe. And a couple of months later, I received the good news that many schools in this country, great schools in this country, had accepted me. So I went to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to tell the people in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, hey, it was a pleasure working with you. This is a friendly goodbye. I want to do different things in my personal life. I feel that I have the right to do so. Unfortunately, the way that they took the news wasn't the one that I expected. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs needed the state security department of the Ministry of Interior, not the Cuban government. They didn't like my decision, and they felt that I was betraying the communist ideas, being a diplomat, having worked at the UN, having known how that diplomatic mission works, and now betraying them, saying, I don't want to work with you anymore. So I needed to wait a year until I could have a regular passport to be able to travel to the US again, right? So I waited a year, and I tried to apply for jobs. And every time that I applied for a job, I received the same notification. State security agents were there before saying, you better don't hire a traitor. So I couldn't be able to work in that year. And I used to receive calls from the state security agent in charge of my case. The guy knew everything about me and about my family. Like one day, it was the birthday of my daughter, and the guy called me, hey, congratulations on your daughter's birthday. And I was, well, thank you. How does this guy know that today is my daughter's birthday? And another day, July 11th, 2021, huge protests in Havana and all over the country. Manifestation, people asking for freedom, which is expected in a country like Cuba. And the same guy called me and said to me, hey, Joel, keep behaving, like saying, we are looking at you, so be careful, right? And the peak of my desperation came the day that I received a notification that I had to go to Villa Marista. That's a terrible place in Havana, because that's the headquarters of the state security counterintelligence of the Ministry of Interior. So everybody in Havana knows that you better try not to go there. So I had to go to that place, and I spent 8 hours in an interrogation in Villa Marista. And for 8 hours, the guys in front of me didn't stop asking me, hey, Joel, tell us why you are here. Tell us why you are here. Do you know what this place is? Do you know what we do here? Tell us why you are here. Tell me your story. So they were drilling my brain, actually. So in the minute that I returned that afternoon after 8 hours of interrogation to my home, I knew, and I told to my wife, hey, these guys are never gonna let me leave this country. I will never be able to have a regular passport. I will never be able to travel regularly with a plane to the US, to the universities that are waiting for me. So we decided to do the unexpected. Laura, my wife, and my little daughter would travel through Nicaragua and then Central America in direction to the US, while I would try to find a way in the meantime to escape Cuba by a boat. It was a sort of a crazy plan. It was the result of desperation in many ways. So I remember that fateful night when I was in Havana, knowing that Laura, my wife, and my daughter 4 years old, were crossing the Yuma River in Arizona in direction to the US. So can you imagine my desperation? I mean, I had returned to Cuba to be with them, and now they were alone crossing a muddy river, going through a wall, entering through a border, surrendering to the US Border Patrol, not knowing what was happening over there. I could only pray to God that my little daughter and my wife will be okay. So it took me 6 months and 9 attempts of escape to finally reach the boat that took me to the US, that took me to freedom. It was difficult, it was challenging, but we made it. We are free. On October 2022, I could embrace my daughter and my wife again after the travels and the desperation and being in prison for a week. I had that part too. So I think that we have reasons to be happy and to be extremely proud of having survived, of not having drowned in the Caribbean Sea, of having my daughter and my wife arrive to the US. And more importantly, I think that we can be proud of practicing forgiveness. I have forgiven my oppressors. And that's why, together with some Cuban friends and colleagues, we have founded the NGO Alliance for Social Action, ALAS, intending to provide humanitarian support to bridge this gap of hatred with support for the Cuban people. So here in the screen, you can see the QR code. This is the invitation from my side and from the Alliance of Social Actions for you to donate. The situation in Cuba right now is so terrible. I mean, people are only having electricity for 3 hours a day. In the rural city, even being worse. The access to food is terrible. And the situation for political prisoners is even worse. They are lacking medicine, and they are lacking food and support and rights. So please, I appreciate if you can take a minute to send the message to 1,100 political prisoners in Cuba saying that they are not alone. Thank you so much.